All right, so if I were to make a ranking of all of my favorite directors, like Coen Brothers would consistently be top five, no matter like what movie phase I'm in my life. Like Coen Brothers are clearly top five. So I thought I would rank all of my favorite Coen Brother movies. Some of these decisions are going to be kind of controversial, and for me, like I, you know, um, I'll talk about the controversial decisions when I get there. So the first category, like, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna call this not good because like I've seen these movies once, I never really want to see them again. True Grit. I know that everybody has their like panties in a bunch about this. I guess this is the point that I want to make is that like I think that when going into a movie by a certain director, I mean this is the whole like auteur theory, right? That like you have a certain presupposition, a certain like set of expectations, and it doesn't have to like neatly conform to that, but like when you get something completely different, it just kind of throws you into left field, and you don't really know how to like react to it necessarily, right? And True Grit, I mean, maybe it's a good movie, I just found it to be incredibly boring. Like it just wasn't interesting in any way, shape, or form. It felt just so the good thing about the Coen brothers, I think, is that they're really good at like taking different artistic forms and like learning the rules and like really making a good version of that, right? The problem is that like the old western, like you can't make a straight old western. And you realize this if you watch a lot of old westerns. I've watched way too many of them. Like a lot of the famous old westerns are good for their time. They're not good for right now. Like if you go back, they're just really fucking boring. So many of them. And so if you stick too closely to that form, then you're going to end up with a boring movie, right? Like, good examples of how to do it well. I mean, I think The Hateful Eight is one of Tarantino's worst movies. I think when I ranked it near the bottom. But I think that he did a good job of, like, updating the form into, like, an interesting modern type of film, right? Like, people even go and be like, oh, like, Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns. It's like, bro, like, you don't even realize Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns are an update on the traditional western form that True Grit is a film of, right? Like the spaghetti westerns are that's why they're called spaghetti westerns and not just westerns, right? And so, like the True Grit, the original movie was 1969. Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I think it was I was 66, but still, like, the point just the point that I'm making is that, like, I think that when you want to make like the problem with True Grit for me is that the Coen brothers made too good of a movie. I guess is what I'm saying, is that they did too good of a job of sticking to the form, and it was just kind of boring in my opinion. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, I mean, I'm sorry, like, anthology films, like, people have been making them forever, right? Like, Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow, you have all of these old films, like, I think it's a cool form, it's interesting, but, like, I think it's a forgettable movie overall, because it's not, like, actually, like, a movie, it's a bunch of different, like, short vignettes, like, strung together, right? Inside Llewyn Davis just feels like a movie that you'd see from like an NYU kid. I'm sorry, it was just kind of boring in my opinion. Like, I know that they kind of like introduced us to Oscar Isaac, like, it's fine, but like, I mean, I don't know, are people really watching this multiple times? Like, again, don't think it's a good movie. If you disagree with me, I'm sorry. I think most people like this movie because there's like a shout out to Bob Dylan at the end. And I mean, I think I'm gonna get this into another movie of theirs, but I just think also, there's kind of a rule that's been like imposed in Hollywood, which I think of the many studio rules that are bad. I think this is a good one, which is never make movies about making movies, and never make movies about like being like a struggling artist and stuff. Like, I think that's just not generally compelling to an audience, and so I think that Inside Llewyn Davis kind of violates that rule. I just thought it was not good. So these are the forgettable films. The Man Who Wasn't There, I saw it twice. I still can't really tell you that much about it. It's like an interesting noir film that they made, but like, people don't remember this movie for a good reason because it just wasn't that great. This is going to be my first controversial decision here, putting Barton Fink 13. And the reason why this is a controversial decision is because, I mean, Barton Fink was the first movie in cinematic history to win Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Film, the Palme d'Or at Cannes. But, like, this would be a great accomplishment if, like, you had any respect for the voters at Cannes, which, like, I clearly don't. I made multiple videos about how stupid I think the Oscars are and how awards, people are in general. And there are a lot of stories about this film that it was actually made to, like, mock, like, awards people, which I've also read stories that contradict that, so I'm not 100% sure. But, like, again, a movie about making movies. It's a movie about, like, it's a movie ridiculing voters at Cannes, by the way, but slow, not interesting, not that much happens. There's a lot of, like, him talking to Faulkner, him having conversations about the movie business. Like, if this movie didn't win those awards, nobody would be talking about it, right? Like, it just, like I'm saying, it's the same movie, just happened to not win those awards. If it was overshadowed by another movie from that year, I don't think anyone would remember this film that much. A Serious Man, I actually liked A Serious Man, but we're actually getting to the point now where we're getting to, like, the meat and potatoes of the Coen brothers, and A Serious Man, just for me, just falls outside of that. It is, like, the next 11 movies in my mind are, like, the 11 great Coen brother movies, and A Serious Man is just kind of on the periphery of that group, so I can't really put it in there. That being said, like, I've watched A Serious Man multiple times. I've watched A Serious Man more times than I've watched some of the other movies on this film. It's a fun movie. I just think that because there's no real resolution to the story, and the Coen brothers have kind of become, like, plot abstract artists a little bit, right? Where, like, you kind of have this Picasso thing that happened with them, which you kind of see also with, like, Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, right? Where if you get, like, too good at making plot, you get bored by, like, good, interesting plot dynamics, and so you try to do these other stuff that you find interesting, but, like, the audience doesn't find that interesting, and that's what you kind of have in A Serious Man, where it's like, I don't want to, like, say anything, give away plot, but, like, nothing really, like, that consequential happens. That being said, though, like, I think that the Jefferson Airplane song, when we see him looking out at the end, it's like, when the truth is found to be lies. I think that's awesome. So it is a great movie. Getting better. This is going to be another really controversial opinion of mine. Number 11, No Country for Old Men. I really don't like this movie. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I think I've seen it 4 times. I've fallen asleep 3 of those times. I just think it's slow. Personally, I think it's boring. The fact that it is the Coen brothers movie that won the Oscar for them, I think, is, again, a perfect indictment of why the Oscars are so stupid and why no one really should care about the Academy Awards. I just don't think it's that interesting of a movie. I think it's, like, way too slow. Doesn't really have, like, compelling characters. I'm sorry, I just don't like this movie. Especially if you compare it to all of the other movies. This would be kind of a slap in the face of this movie to have this movie here, but for me, Hail Caesar is number 10. The first time I saw Hail Caesar, I didn't really like it that much because it kind of does some of the other stuff that I was criticizing the other Coen Brothers movies for. That being said, I think it does it a lot more interestingly. The musical numbers, I think, are interesting. It has cool plot dynamics where you have, what's his name? Channing Tatum, be the guy, and, like, the star sees him, and then you have, the whole thing at the end where it, like, comes back to, like, him, doing this sort of, like, mundane but interesting life. I just think it's overall a good watch. Now, number 9 is Blood Simple. Blood Simple is one of those movies that really blows you away when you first see it, but, like, you don't really want to see it that many more times. I think I've only seen it, like, 2 or 3 times. It's a really good movie, but, like, I think it's one of those movies that once you see it, you're kind of like, I don't really want to see it that many more times, but it's a great movie. It's one of the best first movies of directors ever, which I think is an important distinction, right? Like, Although if you think about like the sort of like right now, I think of the directors that are making movies in the past 20 years, the big three are kind of like in this sort of uh, you know generation. The three best are clearly Tarantino, the Coen brothers, and Christopher Nolan. Of the three of them, I think that Blood Simple is the worst of the three first movies. I think the best one is actually Following, partly because it was filmed on a $50,000 budget. That was Christopher Nolan's first movie, and partly because it is so good. And then number two, Reservoir Dogs, which I think is amazing, and then Blood Simple. I think of those three is the third one. Now we're going to core Coen Brothers. So of these eight movies, like if you were to say that any of these eight were your favorite Coen Brothers movies, I would completely respect that opinion. I think that any of these eight can make a play for the best Coen Brothers movie. This is just like my personal order. So number eight, Raising Arizona. I mean, this movie is just phenomenal, right? Like you have a unbelievable Nicolas Cage performance in like the prime of Nicolas Cage's career, like when he was actually like making good movies. You have like an interesting plot, funny characters, funny conversations, interesting characters, right? You kind of have this like group of lovable hillbillies. And yeah, this plot that revolves around a baby, just an all around incredible movie that I really enjoyed. Hudsucker Proxy gets a lot of hate, but I don't know why. Like, this movie is so incredible, so fun. Like, I watched it again after like hearing all the criticism, and I just don't agree with any of it. Again, like I think that like one of the things that, and I'm gonna get to this in the later movies, but like one of the things that you really sign up, like if you were to find a Coen Brothers movie by like three characteristics, the first one is like interesting, eccentric characters. Number two is dynamic dialogue, and number three is like really intricately constructed plot dynamics. And the Hudsucker Proxy has all three of them. He also has like a really great rooting character. You have this like awesome premise. Hudsucker Proxy all the way. People might think that this is a little bit low. And like if someone wants to put Fargo as the number one favorite Coen Brothers movie, like fine. I completely. I don't agree with that opinion, but like I think it's completely justified. For me, it just never really clicked as a film. It just never really like hit home that much. I think it might just be because of like where it's situated, like just the fact that it's in North Dakota. For me, just like doesn't it just didn't really click. That being said, again, eccentric characters. The fact that it's in North Dakota, like really like does fits that bill. That being said, for as I said, like it just for something about it just didn't really like hit home that much. Even though the first time I saw it, like the other movies, I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. Now here are my top 5 top tier movies. Burn After Reading. I mean, again, like all of these movies could easily be number one. Burn After Reading. Unbelievable plot, unbelievable characters. Like I think pretty much every single person in this film could headline their own movie. Maybe not all of them could like headline their own like 10, 20, $30 million movie, but like every single one could headline like a $5 million movie, right? I think all of them have, right? So number one, just incredible acting, incredible plot, and then at the end, the whole like, oh, okay, so like this was all for nothing. Like, what did we learn? Was an incredible joke that put an incredible bow on the whole story because it was kind of like an interesting dig at the audience, at the Coen brothers, at this whole like, so what's the point of all of this stuff? Absolutely nothing, but it's a good time. So, yeah, it was incredible. Number 4, Miller's Crossing. Yeah, this is still like it's kind of hard for me to not put this one higher, but it just got beat out by the others. Again, interesting plot. Early 1900s New York. You have some of the elements of like other types of movies that like I don't really care for as much, but are done really well here, right? Like you have like the symbolism of like the place where like they get shot. You have all this other type of stuff. I mean, I think it just does everything very well, and it's an incredibly well done movie. If you're looking for any movie to get you into the Coen brothers, I think this is it. And then again, like in terms of like intricate plots, it's not as intricate as the rest, but it does do a good job of like really hitting the beats and then hitting home at the end. Number three, Big Lebowski. I have a really weird relationship with this movie where I watch it, I love it. Then like a week or two later, I'm like, I don't know, is the Big Lebowski really that good? And then I walk around for like a couple months thinking the Big Lebowski isn't really that good. And then I'm like, okay, fine, let me rewatch it. And then I rewatch it. I'm like, holy shit, this is an unbelievable movie. And then a week or two later, I forget how good it is. So when I put it number three on this list, I actually didn't really. I don't believe it in my heart that The Big Lebowski is number three, but that's because it's been a long time since I've watched it. But I remember thinking to myself so many times, like, "Wow, you're an idiot for not putting it higher." So that's why it's here. I mean, intellectually, it's an unbelievable movie, right? Like the John Goodman character, is incredible. The fact that he's Jewish, the fact that he's talking about Nam constantly, the nihilists who believe in nothing. John Turturro obviously has an incredible role. Steve Buscemi, like this movie is the most eccentric Coen Brothers movie by far, and again could easily be number one. If anybody puts this as number one, it's like completely justified. And like I think that like another thing that I love about this movie is that like I think that what the Coen brothers do really well, and I think one of the reasons why their movies hit so well with the public, which is why I don't think the Academy really like rewards them and recognizes them, is they're kind of like the best comparison for me for the Coen brothers in this respect is kind of like Danny McBride, where like Danny McBride, shows like the Eastbound and Down, Vice Principals, Righteous Gemstones. It's kind of like the middle of the country are like his protagonists, right? It's like guys going bowling, like these types of things, and just types of environments and locations and conversations that don't really get their due in Hollywood, but are really underrepresented in Hollywood in a meaningful way, right? Like if you think about bowling, like there have been bowling movies like Kingpin, but it's always like kind of like a joke about the bowling. It never really takes bowling earnestly as like a thing that people do to pass the time, when bowling is a huge part of American culture, right? And so that's something that I think this movie does very well. Some other movies, of theirs that I think, do this very well are, Fargo, obviously, Raising Arizona, obviously, A Serious Man, obviously. And I think that, if you think about movies like, the more critically acclaimed ones, like Inside Llewyn Davis, Barton Fink, and No Country for Old Men, like, it's interesting that, like, those are the, they take all the other stuff that makes Coen Brothers movies great, and they really like ratchet it down, but they are centered on protagonists that are more Hollywood friendly, right? Inside Llewyn Davis is about a struggling artist. Like, how many movies have we seen about a struggling artist, right? Barton Fink is about a screenwriter. Obviously, screenwriters love that, right? No Country for Old Men is about a cop and a killer, right? Like, these are more in line with the typical Hollywood archetypes, and I think that the Academy and those types of people understand a lot better, but they understand those archetypes a lot better because they're so detached from normal day lives, normal day people, right? While I think the reason why movies like The Big Lebowski don't really get that acclaim, but are the ones that normal people like the most, because they're the ones that actually like speak to people, right? They actually like speak to who we are, or like the day-to-day activities of what it means to be an American. So that's like if I were to say anything, like that's what I think is like the interesting dichotomy between between the dynamic of how Hollywood views Coen Brothers and how normal people view Coen Brothers, and why I don't think that the Coen Brothers have gotten the respect that they deserve, and why I think that the movies that got the respect are the ones that shouldn't have gotten the respect. So yeah, that's why I love The Big Lebowski. This is gonna be a really controversial opinion. Number two, Intolerable Cruelty. I don't think most people have seen this movie. I don't think it really made that much money when it came out. But I think that, like, again, like if we were to take like the three things, so it made 120 on 60, which is basically barely breaking even. Like if you take the three things that like make a Coen Brother movie great are, interesting characters, intricate plots, and quippy dialogue. Like it has all three of those in spades. You have the guy from The Hotel, which is incredible. Obviously, George Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones. You have Billy Bob Thornton has a great character. All of these people are really interesting, eccentric, and engaging. And then on top of that, like I think this has the best dialogue of any Coen Brothers movie, and maybe like some of the best dialogue of any movie that I've seen. I'd say, the there's a scene where he's talking like the Sherpa scene where he's talking about like how he needs a Sherpa. That's a great scene. The scene where in the beginning with the negotiation is an incredible scene, right? It's just overall incredible. So I think you should watch this. I highly recommend. And then number one, Oh Brother Where Art Thou. It's just the most fun. I think that like one thing that, in general, I think movies kind of miss is just the fun aspect. Like that movies should be fun and enjoyable. And I think that Oh Brother Where Art Thou has it in spades. It's enjoyable, exciting, funny. George Clooney obviously has an incredible performance. And yeah, this is by far my favorite Coen Brothers movie. I'd say like 1,000%. I can watch this 100 times. I actually didn't even know that this was a Coen Brothers movie until like way later. I think I saw it in theaters when I was like 10 years old, and I was just blown away by it, and I've loved it ever since. So yeah, that's my list. Let me know what you think.